Let's play this out. Two physical therapy businesses, the exact same earnings. So they have the same bottom line. One company gets a really solid offer. The other one gets no offer. So what is going on there? It almost always comes down to the quality of your EBITDA. So let me walk you through what the quality of your EBITDA really means, because this is where a lot of your value and money gets made or lost. And many owners just don't have the time to really understand where an acquirer is coming from with this extremely important topic. So this is how an acquirer will value your business. And although there is a lot more to it, it really comes down to two numbers. The first one is EBITDA. And although I've said this before, that sounds like a fine French wine. It stands for it stands for earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. It's a mouthful. But don't let that term throw you. All it really means is it's the cash flow of your business. And it's the cash flow that your business will generate moving forward once you are acquired on an adjusted basis. So this is the number a buyer starts with when they begin to put a value on your business. Now, the second number is the multiple. So the buyer will take your EBITDA and they will multiply it by a number to determine the value. So let's say your practice makes $1 million of EBITDA. If the buyer puts a 6 multiple on that EBITDA, that's a $6 million value. If they put a 4 multiple, now that very same business has a value of $4 million. Same earnings, but a $2 million difference in valuation. Now, here's the part that many physical therapy business owners will miss. They're pouring all their energy into growing that EBITDA number. And look, that matters, right? I'm not saying it doesn't, but the multiple is where a huge chunk of your value will get won or will be lost. And the multiple in many cases will come down to what we call the quality of your earnings. And remember, your earnings is your EBITDA. So it's the quality of that EBITDA. All right, so what do we mean by quality of earnings? It really comes down to how much a buyer trusts your earnings going forward and how confident they are that those earnings are still going to be there and continue to grow at some point in the future after they've acquired your business and after you are no longer running the business. That could be many years down the road. Because that's what they're really buying. They're not just determining a multiple simply on what you made last year. They're paying for what they believe the practice is going to keep earning year after year as it relates to the multiple. So the cleaner and the more predictable and the more durable your earnings are, the higher the value. On the flip side, the messier or the riskier your earnings look, the more they will pull back and protect themselves and their risk by paying less. So let me give you today just a few things that we believe will drive your value positively or what will drive your value negatively. All right, so number one, you want clean and accurate financials. This is absolutely the foundation That's why we have a CPA on staff to make sure that you have clean and accurate financials. If your financials are not in order, okay, what does that mean? I mean, things are not matching up from the balance sheet to the profit and loss. Things on an expense line are not being seen or being adjusted, but they can't find an expense line up in the adjustments. And if your financials are not in order, every single conversation with an acquirer gets harder and harder, because an acquirer is going to bring their own team at some point into your process, and they're going to do what's called a quality of earnings. That is a living autopsy. They will go through your numbers line by line to make sure everything is real. And if your reporting is somewhat sloppy, if the statements don't tie out, as I just mentioned, if you have a lot of personal expenses being expensed through the business, the buyer starts to wonder what else could be wrong in your numbers. And that doubt will come right out of your multiple. So getting all of this cleaned up well before you go to market, it is absolutely one of the best steps you can take. Please trust me on that one. Number 2, adjustments that you can confidently defend. Look, most owner-run physical therapy businesses run some personal expenses through the business that a new owner just will not continue. Maybe it's a car. Maybe it's some personal travel. Maybe you pay yourself more than you'd have to pay a replacement for yourself in your business. When we take your earnings to an acquirer, we adjust for all of that. And that is to show what the business really earns and what it will continue to earn moving forward. And that is called your adjusted EBITDA. But here's the real key. Every one of those adjustments have to be real, and you're going to have to prove it. So a clean, well-documented adjustment will absolutely be acceptable. Ones that you can't back up will make an acquirer question all of them. The first one that you can't put your finger on, now they're all going to be questionable. And now you have a problem. So number 3, how much, and this seems to be far away from the EBITDA, the cash flow of the business, but how much does the practice depend on you? And this is a real big one in our world. So what if you were just to ask yourself this? If you took a vacation for 3 months starting tomorrow, how would your business actually run? And so if you're the one that are holding all the key relationships, a buyer will look at that and see risk. They're thinking a lot of those earnings could walk right out the door the same day that you do. And now this doesn't mean that you're not important. You're crucially important. And in most cases, an acquirer in this current market are going to want an owner to commit 3 to 5 years of continued partnership with the buyer. But if you are so essential to the business that it can't run without you, that adds risk to what? To your earnings moving forward. So every risk that we identify almost always comes back to what impact it has on your earnings. So if you have an extremely strong team that can show that the team can do many of the tasks that you do, that will prove strength in your earnings, and you will absolutely get a higher multiple for your business. What it means is that the business can run and treat patients without you, and that's a practice and a business with durable earnings. And you'll hear me use this word again. Durable earnings will yield a higher multiple. All right, a couple more. We got two more here. Concentration. So if a real big piece of your referrals and your revenue are coming from just one or two or just a few referral sources or just a few payer contracts, that's what we call concentration risk. The acquirer knows that if one of those physicians or payer, we call it the bus risk. If one of those physicians or something gets run over by a bus or something happens to that payer, there's going to be a big chunk of your earnings that will go away right along with it. So a business with a healthy mix, a bunch of strong referral sources, a good spread of payers, that just looks a lot safer. And safer earnings will always generate what? A higher and a stronger multiple. All right, number 5, predictability and growth. Buyers love earnings and EBITDA that they can count on. And they really love a business that is growing. So if you can show that you have had steady growth in the past and you show a story with names of markets, names of potential opportunities in the future, that you can grow and scale, and you show them a plan of your future growth, you absolutely will then go back to and show predictability and growth in those earnings. And you will absolutely get a higher multiple. It doesn't mean that an acquirer is going to pay what you're going to earn in your plan 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road, but it always will mean a higher multiple because you're showing the ability in the past to have grown and you're showing the ability to plan for future growth. And that is huge. So here's where we spend a lot of our time with owners. We work on the quality of your earnings as we just have outlined. And that will be time well spent, and you will make that back in value many times over. I promise you. Go back to the example that I gave at the very beginning, which is two companies with two of the same exact earnings, and one company gets a great offer, the other company gets no offer. Or on $1 million of EBITDA, the difference between a 4 multiple and a 6 multiple, that's a $2 million difference. And what does it come down to? The durability and predictability of your earnings and your EBITDA in the past and moving forward. And all of this is absolutely within your control. So take the time to have someone that you trust, CPA, a consulting company, we do this work all the time, to go through your financials like an acquirer would go through your financials. Because that will result on a plan to make your financials and EBITDA clean and ready for an acquirer to do that quality of earnings. So look, when you sit down and think about what your business and the real value of your business, don't just look at the number of your bottom line. Look at the quality of that bottom line, and you will have multiple companies at some point in your future that will have an interest, will be a feeding frenzy for your business when you have that clean and healthy EBITDA. Thank you again for joining me today. And if you have any questions or you would just like to talk through anything that I covered here today, just click below. Let's talk. Thank you, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.